Please leave, you're making our customers uncomfortable. Those words shoved me right out the door. The bar door in Queens, New York, slammed behind me, and the night air, thick with frying oil and beer, rushed across my face. I had made myself look like a homeless old man, standing there on the sidewalk in front of my second son's bar, with torn sneakers and wet socks on my feet. I had swallowed it, I had crumbled inside. And in that moment I felt like the loneliest old man in the world. Still, somewhere in my heart I quietly made up my mind. I would endure every bit of this humiliation, watch it all to the end, and then choose with my own eyes who truly deserved my blood. Why I chose to dress like a beggar and stand in front of my own children like that. I'll tell you that story now. You're listening to Silver Story Tree, where the voices of life's late chapters gently bloom again. Subscribe, like, and turn on the bell to hear more heartfelt stories that grow with time. Bang! The sound of a rusted metal gate closing echoed across the abandoned steel mill on the outskirts of Pittsburgh. I'm Henry Miller, 78 years old. I spent my entire life in this steel factory. But now, standing beneath this corroded smokestack, I was repeating an unbelievable number in my head. $20 million. That's what I received when the plant buyout, compensation and industrial injury settlement were combined. I pulled out an old flannel shirt I'd buried deep in my closet. Ripped jeans and worn-out sneakers with holes in the soles. Sophia asked me from beside me if I was really going out dressed like that. I just nodded. In my hand, I held a yellow envelope. Inside was a business card from a Manhattan law firm. But from the outside, it just looked like an empty envelope. The Greyhound bus terminal was filled with the smell of coffee and hot dogs. The scent of hot grease stung my nose. Instead of buying a ticket to New York, I bought one to New Jersey. I had to see my eldest daughter first. Melissa lived in a high-rise apartment in Jersey City. She had an impressive title too, HR manager at a finance company. My reflection in the apartment lobby's glass window was unmistakably that of a homeless man. Hunched back, tattered clothes, dirty shoes. The receptionist blocked my way, saying only residents could enter. I replied quietly that I was here to see my daughter. That I was Melissa Ross's father. The employee hesitated for a moment, then reluctantly pressed the intercom button. The doorbell rang and after a while, the door opened. Melissa frowned briefly at my appearance before forcing a smile. "Dad, what happened to you?" she asked. The living room displayed Ivy League pennants and crystal wine glasses. Student loan bills and mortgage statements were scattered messily across the table. Melissa sighed and continued talking. They had no room to spare either. Hurricane insurance, apartment mortgage, the kids' college tuition, it was all overwhelming. I sat quietly and listened to my daughter. Then I asked carefully if I could stay with them for a while. Even just a corner of a room. Melissa's eyes wavered for a moment, then hardened. There were the kids' school issues and their life was too complicated. Instead, she pulled out a $100 bill from her wallet and placed it in my hand. "This should last you a few days," she said. "For now this is all I can do." I stood up slowly. I pocketed the $100 and said thank you. I came down to the lobby and took the elevator. My face in the mirror was full of wrinkles, but my eyes were clear. I muttered to myself. The first test was over. Walking down toward the Hudson River, I touched the voice recorder in my pocket. The red light was blinking. Every conversation was being recorded. Melissa's words, her tone, her expressions, all remained in my memory. I headed back to the bus terminal. My next destination was Queens. On the bus, looking out the window, I thought about how strange money was. When you have it, you don't notice. But when you don't, you see people's true nature. The $100 in my hand felt heavy. It was sad that this was all my daughter could give her father. But at the same time I was curious. What about the next child? How would my second son Michael treat me? That evening I got a room at a small motel. Lying on the bed, I stared at the ceiling. I thought of my wife. My wife who passed away without proper treatment. Because we couldn't afford the hospital bills. If I had had this much money back then, could I have saved her? I closed my eyes. Tomorrow would be Queens. The morning air was cold. I took the subway to Queens. It was a neighborhood called Astoria. The streets were filled with the mixed smells of frying oil and beer. Tobacco smoke added to it, making the alley look hazy. I walked slowly, looking for the sign. I saw the neon sign that said Miller's Sports Bar. As soon as I pushed the door open, a young employee shouted that they don't take homeless people here. I raised my head. Michael, who was behind the counter, saw me and froze. "Is that Dad?" he asked. His voice was clearly flustered. On the wall behind the counter were overdue rent notices and credit card collection notices. On the television, a baseball game was playing loudly. Customers were holding beer glasses and cheering. I approached Michael carefully. I asked if he could lend me a corner of his storage room for just one night. Michael slammed the refrigerator door and answered. "This is a business," he said. "I can't show customers this kind of scene." He's barely keeping his own family afloat. I heard his wife whisper from the side, asking if he was doing this because he was afraid the money talk would come up again. At that moment, a small red light blinked inside my worn jacket. It was the voice recorder. Still recording. I muttered to myself. Yes, this was the talk I wanted to hear. Michael eventually opened the store door and said to take a cab back to Pittsburgh. "Don't stand out front here, it makes the customers uncomfortable." I slowly walked outside. Raindrops began to fall. Standing in front of the Astoria Boulevard subway station, I pulled out an old flip phone. Jake's name appeared on the screen. My finger trembled. I debated whether to call or not, then finally pressed the call button. "Jake, it's Dad, do you have a minute?" The moment my voice came out, I choked up. Jake asked urgently where I was, if something was wrong. I answered that I was in Astoria, getting a bit wet in the rain. Jake said he'd take the subway right away. "Wait," he said, "I'll be there soon." I saw a cardboard box in a corner of an alley near the station. I sat down next to it and waited. The rain soaked into my collar, but I didn't care. I just had to wait until Jake arrived. How long passed? I heard running footsteps. Jake rushed into the alley. When he found me, he dropped to his knees and cried out, "Jesus, Dad." Then he took off his jacket and wrapped it around my shoulders. Without a word, he pulled out his phone and called an Uber. He was getting a ride to Brooklyn. In the car, Jake kept holding my hand. It was warm. I looked out the window and thought about it. Melissa gave me $100, Michael turned me away. But my poorest youngest son came running on a rainy night to take me home. This was exactly the scene I wanted to see. By the time we arrived in Brooklyn, it was late at night. Jake's place was a small basement studio. Going down the stairs, there was a damp smell. But Jake smiled brightly and said, "It's small but warm, come on in." I almost cried at that moment. Inside the room were just a small sofa, one bed, and a folding table. Still, Jake turned on the electric heater and brought out a clean towel. "Take a shower first," he said, "wash your hair too." I went into the bathroom and looked in the mirror. A shabby old man stood there. After I finished showering, Jake had put an egg in cup noodles and placed it in front of me. He said he could go out driving at night again, so I should eat a lot. Sipping the hot broth, I repeated to myself, "This is the child I was looking for, the one who saw the person, not the money." After Jake fell asleep, I took out a small notebook. It was an old notebook, but it was an important item to me. At the top, it said Newell Notes. It was even underlined. I turned on my smartphone and sent an email to lawyer Robert Baker. "We need to talk," I wrote, "I want to change everything." Next to the notebook, I placed a small recorder and a USB drive side by side. They were evidence. Melissa and Michael's voices were all recorded. I looked out the window. Only streetlights were dimly shining on the Brooklyn night streets. I muttered, "Now the real test isn't for me, it's their turn." Morning came. Jake woke up and prepared to go to work. After finishing his convenience store night shift, he now had to go out for Uber driving. Watching him, my heart ached. This child who had been ignored his whole life for being a high school graduate was now showing the most human behavior. Before Jake left, he said there were sandwiches in the fridge for lunch, and we'd eat dinner together when he came back in the evening. I said thank you. The door closed and I was alone. I slowly looked around the room. It was old but clean, small but warm. Around lunchtime, Sophia came by. She was Jake's partner. She said she worked as a caregiver. At first, she seemed burdened by my presence here. Naturally, an old man had moved into a cramped basement. But Sophia silently placed heat packs on my feet. I asked Sophia what kind of person Jake usually was. Sophia thought for a moment and answered, "He doesn't talk much but has a strong sense of responsibility. Once he extends his hand, he never lets go." I nodded. "That's why I chose this child," I said to myself. When Jake came back in the evening, I made up my mind. I had to give this child a proper life. $20 million wasn't just a number. It was the weight of my entire life, the treatment my wife never received, my grandchildren's future. Who I would entrust it to was practically already decided. At night, Jake said he was going out for night driving again. I tried to stop him. "Rest today," I said, "stay with Dad." Jake smiled and answered, "It's okay," he said, "suffering when you're young is good." Hearing that, I thought this child had only suffered his whole life. The next morning, I told Jake I needed to go to Manhattan, that I had to meet with a lawyer. Jake asked in surprise, "A lawyer? Is something wrong?" I waved my hand. "It's fine," I said, "just have some things to sort out." I took the subway to Manhattan. Sunlight shone between the midtown skyscrapers. Standing in front of the law firm building, I took a deep breath. This was the real beginning. Pushing through the revolving door, I made a promise to myself. I wasn't testing people with money. I was choosing the owner of the money through people. In the elevator, I looked in the mirror. My clothes looked a bit better now. I was wearing a shirt Jake had washed for me. A shirt where Jake had sewn back on a button that had fallen off. I touched that button and smiled. This is what love is, I thought. Lawyer Robert Baker guided me to the conference room. Through the glass, I could see the Hudson River. The spire of the Chrysler Building was sparkling in the sunlight. I stood blankly for a moment, looking at that scene. Baker asked, "Mr. Miller, do you really need to test your children like this?" I slowly turned my head to look at the lawyer. And I answered, "I want to see with my own eyes who will use this money and how after I'm gone." "Money doesn't change people, it reveals their true nature," I said. And I wanted to confirm that. Baker opened his laptop. On the screen appeared CCTV footage from in front of the Queen's Bar. It was the scene of Michael kicking me out. The voice saying "This is a business place. Don't make customers uncomfortable" was clear. Watching that footage, my heart ached. But this was reality. Next, the recording from Melissa's house played. The voice saying she couldn't live with Dad. That their life was too complicated. I closed both eyes. It was hard to hear, but I had to hear it. This was the evidence I had prepared, this would be the basis for my choice. Baker began reading the new will. The existing equal distribution is revoked. Most of the estate goes into a trust managed by youngest son Jake Miller, with the condition of elder care and establishment of a scholarship foundation. I nodded as I heard those words. I added to Baker's words, "Let me say again, I have no intention of starving them. I just want them to receive as much as they treated me as a human being." Baker nodded in understanding and organized the documents. He explained that the original will and copies would be stored in both the bank vault and the firm vault. On my way out of the law firm, I walked the streets. Taxi horns were noisy, and the smell of hot dogs cooking rose from street food carts. New York's characteristic chaos filled my ears. I muttered, "Money becomes a monster the moment it sits on top of people." I took the subway back to Brooklyn. When I opened the basement door, Jake was putting heat packs on my feet. I sat on the sofa and watched that scene. A child who was looked down on for being a high school graduate, despised for having no money, but still acted like a human being to the end. My phone vibrated. It was a text from Baker. "Everything is ready, just set the date." I opened the calendar and circled a date with a red pen. That would be the day the truth was revealed. Jake asked what I was looking at, "Dad." I folded the calendar and answered, "Nothing, just remembered an important appointment and marked it." Jake said "Oh okay" and smiled. Looking at that smile, I was certain. Trusting this child was right. Only this child could use money as money should be used. Night deepened. Jake went out for Uber driving again, and I looked out the window alone. Lights on the Brooklyn night streets were turning off one by one. I touched the yellow envelope and thought, soon everything would be revealed. I didn't know what the kids would feel then, but at least they would know the truth. After that day, I took walks every morning. Walking through Brooklyn Park, I organized my thoughts. The weight of the number $20 million, the faces of my 3 children. My wife's last moments, Jake's warm hands, everything came to mind. And I was certain. My choice was right. The doorbell rang. The door to the large conference room at the Manhattan law firm opened. And the 3 siblings entered one by one. Melissa came first, followed by Michael. Jake arrived last. On one side of the conference room, the Hudson River was visible. Chairs were placed around a long mahogany table. I heard Melissa whisper quietly to Michael. Dad received some land compensation. And they did raises so something would come their way. Michael grinned and replied. The 3 of them would split it fairly, Jake could get a little less. I was listening to that conversation. From down the hall, the door opened again. This time I entered. I was wearing a sharp dark navy suit, unlike usual. The expressions of all 3 siblings changed at once. Melissa's eyes widened, Michael couldn't close his mouth. Only Jake smiled quietly. Lawyer Robert Baker spread out a stack of documents and spoke. We will begin reading Henry Miller's last will and testament. I sat at the end of the table and looked at my 3 children. Melissa was clenching her hands nervously, Michael kept looking at his watch. Jake was just watching me. Baker began reading the first sentence. I, Henry Miller, received approximately $20 million in compensation from the plant buyout and industrial injury settlement. At that moment, all 3 siblings gasped simultaneously. Melissa's hands trembled, Michael leaned forward. The number $20 million made the air heavy. Baker continued reading. My eldest daughter Melissa and second son Michael treated their aging father as a burden. And refused even basic care, therefore their share will be limited. Melissa kicked back her chair and stood up. What? She shouted, what is this? The monitor turned on. It was CCTV footage from in front of the Queen's Bar. The scene of Michael kicking me out was clearly visible. Then the recording from Melissa's house played. The words about how living with Dad would complicate their lives. How they couldn't spare even a corner of a room filled the conference room. The air froze. Melissa's face turned pale. Michael repeatedly clenched and unclenched his fist. Baker read the core of the will. The majority of the estate will go into a trust managed by youngest son Jake Miller, with the condition of establishing the Henry Miller Scholarship and Care Fund. Melissa jumped up and shouted. Jake is just a high school graduate, he can't manage that kind of money. That's when I spoke clearly for the first time. It's not the diploma, it's the person. It's not the degree, it's the heart. The conference room became quiet. Jake said nothing. He was just looking at me. There was surprise in his eyes, but no greed. Looking into those eyes, I was certain. Entrusting it to this child was right. The only person who wouldn't see money as just money, who would use money to save people, was this child. Baker closed the documents and said the details would be explained through individual consultations. Melissa and Michael would also receive minimal living expense support. But the main management authority and usage decisions belonged to Jake. I looked at my 3 children and muttered. This is what's fair. Afternoon sunlight shone through the conference room window. Manhattan's buildings were glowing. Standing up, I thought. Money didn't change the family, money revealed the family's true nature. And among those true natures, the most beautiful was Jake's. Melissa began sobbing. Michael hung his head low. Jake still sat quietly. Looking at them, I knew. This was the real beginning. We hadn't divided money, we'd divided responsibility. That afternoon, clouds slowly drifted over the Hudson River. The lawyer and staff left the conference room. Only the 3 siblings and I remained. Through the window, I could see the wind brushing over the Hudson River. The waves sparkled in the sunlight. My hands trembling, I opened my mouth. Do you remember your mother? I asked. Do you remember how Mom passed away without proper treatment? Because we couldn't afford the hospital bills? All 3 siblings bowed their heads. Melissa's eyes reddened. That's why she wanted to work harder, she said. She didn't want to live like Mom. Didn't want to create a family that collapsed from lack of money again. Michael spoke quietly. If the store fails one more time, his family will be on the streets, he said. Honestly, he was scared. He didn't have confidence he could take care of his father too. I looked at both children. It's not that I don't understand, I said. I know your situations. But I can't entrust this money to children. Who couldn't even let a trembling old man on the street into their homes? Money doesn't change people, it reveals their true nature, I said. You chose fear, Jake chose responsibility. That's the difference. Jake carefully interjected. Dad, don't give me too much. My sister and brother are still my family. Can't we redistribute it properly? At those words, tears rolled down my cheeks. Yes, that's why you should manage it, because you didn't abandon me. And you're not trying to abandon your siblings either. I grasped Jake's hand tightly. Do you remember what I said before? A person's worth is determined by the hand they extend when someone has fallen. Jake nodded. That sentence stuck in his chest again like a planted seed. Melissa said tearfully she was sorry. That she saw Dad as a burden, not a person. Michael also raised his head. He said he was wrong, asking if they could start over. I looked at both children. It's late, but if you've realized it, that's enough. I said, just do it right from now on. Jake looked at his brother and sister and said, let's work together. Let's use this money to protect our family. Hearing those words, I was certain. This child would use the money properly, would tie the family back together. Warm afternoon sunlight from Manhattan shone through the window. I told the 3 children. The money is settled now, what remains is sorting out our relationships. We have to go to the bank, the courthouse, the registry office. Melissa said she'd come along. Michael also said he'd help. Jake was still quiet, but his eyes were firm. Looking into those eyes, I thought. If my wife were alive, she would have been proud of this child. High school graduate or whatever, she would have said. He's the child with the finest character. We left the conference room and took the elevator. The elevator with 4 people together was quiet but not heavy. Each was lost in thought, but something felt resolved. Coming down to the lobby and going outside, New York's noise filled our ears. Taxi horns, sirens, people's voices mixed together. Watching the 4 of us walk together, I muttered. This is just the beginning, becoming a real family starts now. Melissa took my arm. Michael hailed a taxi. Jake followed quietly from behind. That afternoon, we were a family. A whiteboard stood in a small conference room at the law firm. The Henry Miller Scholarship and Care Fund was written in large letters. Below it, a 3-way structure diagram was drawn. Elder care account, scholarship account, sibling living expense support. Divided into 3 branches. Lawyer Baker explained. Jake would become the managing trustee. Melissa and Michael would receive limited monthly support. Amounts based on basic needs, not luxury. Melissa asked if they could join as board members. Baker firmly shook his head. Your father's wishes were clear. Jake stepped forward. Sister, brother, instead we can help the nieces and nephews' tuition. Through this scholarship fund, let's not make the kids suffer because of our fight. Michael sighed and answered. In the end, the father he pushed away is coming back like this. I stamped the seal and said it wasn't to punish them. It was to make sure no one ever loses family because of money again. Melissa nodded. Michael bit his lip. Jake took out a small laptop and started making a budget spreadsheet. Starting the next day, we went around government offices. County clerk's office, banks, city hall, we visited them in order. We stamped and signed various documents. I walked slowly with my cane but followed through to the end. Since it was a foundation being created in my name, I had to confirm it myself. It was when we were setting up the account at the bank. The employee asked why we were creating a trust with such a large amount. I answered, to prevent money from destroying people, to make money save people. The employee nodded and organized the documents. We completed the foundation registration at the courthouse. It was officially recognized as a nonprofit organization. Jake's name went up as the executive director. Looking at those documents, I felt proud. The child who was looked down on for being a high school graduate was now the foundation's representative. He was recognized for his character, not his education. We submitted the last documents at City Hall. Factory worker children's scholarships, industrial injury, victim family support, nursing home sponsorship programs were registered as the foundation's main purposes. I held that document and stared at it for a long time. I felt the weight of my entire life in it. In the evening, we returned to the Brooklyn basement. Sophia had prepared dinner. 4 people sat around the small table and ate. Melissa said she was sorry, Dad, and would do right from now on. Michael also bowed his head. Jake pulled out a new leather jacket. "It's a gift for you," he said. "Keep that old flannel shirt as decoration only, wear this jacket now." I received the jacket and tried it on. It was warm. Jake smiled and said it looked good on me. I zipped it up and laughed. Right, now I don't need to pretend to be homeless to see people's true colors. On the table sat an envelope from the Pittsburgh hospital. An envelope I hadn't opened yet. Looking at it, I knew. The end was really approaching now. At night, alone, I opened the envelope. Inside was a diagnosis. My heart had weakened significantly. It said I should take time to settle my affairs. I folded the paper and put it back in the envelope. Then I looked out the window. Stars were visible in the Brooklyn night sky. It was a consultation room at the Pittsburgh hospital. The doctor looked at the chart and said my heart was tired. I should get my affairs in order. I nodded. I already knew. I know my body best. The doctor held out a prescription, but I knew it didn't mean much. It was on the bus ride back to Brooklyn. Through the window, I could see rivers and railroad bridges. I recalled my youth. The night shifts at the factory, the image of my wife lying in a hospital bed. The living room scene of 3 young children. Playing all flashed by like a revolving lantern. When I arrived at the basement, Sophia was organizing medicine bags. Jake sat next to me and said, "Dad, sharing dinner time with you is more precious to me than money." Hearing those words, I smiled gently. I knew this child would say this to the end. I looked at Jake and asked, "Do you remember what I said before? A person's worth is determined by the hand they extend when someone is struggling." Jake answered, "That's why even when he's struggling, he won't let go of Dad's hand. That's the filial piety he can give." At night, I took out the yellow envelope. The envelope that first contained the Manhattan law firm business card. I put a small note inside. In crooked handwriting, I wrote, "May this money not destroy you, but help you save someone." I sealed the envelope again. Months passed. My health gradually worsened, but my mind was at peace. The foundation had officially opened. An opening ceremony was held in a small church hall. Children who lost parents in factory accidents, single mothers, nursing home elderly were gathered. Melissa and Michael were also standing in the back. I heard Melissa whisper to Michael, "Maybe Father believed in us to the very end." Michael answered, "They failed the test, but they could take it again." Jake went up to the podium and took the microphone. He said, "Father left these words: money is not blood. The one who protects your blood is your real family." He would keep these words himself, starting with himself. Applause filled the hall. I sat in the back and cried quietly. After the event ended, people left one by one. Sophia was cleaning up when she found the yellow envelope in my old flannel shirt pocket. She handed it to Jake. When Jake opened the envelope, there was a note inside, written in English. "Jake, the moment you picked me up off that sidewalk." My mind was already made up. Reading that note, Jake looked up. He looked at me with tears streaming down. I raised my hand and patted Jake's shoulder. "You did well," I said, "you really did well." That night, I was admitted to the hospital. My heart had weakened too much to stay home anymore. All 3 siblings came to the hospital room. Melissa held my hand, Michael brought me water. Jake sat beside the bed and listened to my stories. I told the 3 children, "Continue the life your mother couldn't finish. Don't lose family because of money, don't let go of each other's hands." All 3 children were crying. Looking at them, I felt reassured. These children would be okay now. A few days later, I quietly closed my eyes. Morning sunlight was shining through the Brooklyn hospital window. Jake was holding my hand tightly, Melissa and Mike stood beside me. My last thought was, a person's worth is determined by the hand they extend when someone is struggling, and Jake accomplished that. The funeral was quiet. It was held at a Pittsburgh church. Factory coworkers, families who received help from the foundation, neighbors came. Jake read the eulogy. He said Father didn't test people with money. He chose the owner of money through people. That was the last lesson Father left. On the casket lay the old flannel shirt, the shirt I wore when pretending to be homeless. And the yellow envelope was there with it. The envelope that appeared from the beginning. The envelope with the note inside appeared again like a planted seed coming full circle. Jake continued operating the foundation. Melissa and Michael also participated as volunteers. The nieces and nephews attended college on scholarships. Nursing home elders spent warm winters. My money was used to save people. Just as I had wanted. A few years later, Jake had a baby girl. When choosing a name, Sophia asked what they'd call her. Jake answered, Helen, after her grandmother. And the middle name would be Henry, to remember her grandfather. When that child grows up and asks, Jake will tell her the story. How grandfather tested people, how he bound the family together again. That money didn't change the family, money revealed the family's true nature. And that real family is the people who extend their hand when you're struggling. I'm gone now, but my story remains. The yellow envelope hangs in a frame in the foundation office. Next to it is the old flannel shirt I wore. People will look at it and think, if I were the child, what choice would I have made? If I were the parent, how would I have tested them? A person's worth is determined by the hand they extend when someone has fallen. That saying is my legacy. A legacy more valuable than $20 million. And Jake proved it. Every day, quietly, steadily. Everyone, have you ever felt your heart and your family shake in front of money? Like I did? Through this experience, I learned that money is not blood, and the one who holds your hand to the very end is your real family. I realized it late, and I am grateful, but I also felt very lonely and sad. Still, I believe it is not too late. We still have the courage and hope to rebuild our lives. If this reminds you of something you have been through, I would be grateful if you could gently share it in the comments. If my story has given you even a little comfort, please support me with a subscription and a like. If someone comes to mind who might need this story, please quietly pass it along to them. Thank you sincerely for listening to the end. And I truly wish you good health and peace in the years ahead.